Today on Drum Channel Today, a very interesting gentleman we're going to be interviewing, and has had quite an illustrious career. Any one artist you played with, a lot of drummers would think would be enough to make a career out of. And you started with Cyndi Lauper, and then went on to their Soul Asylum was next, or not quite?
No, Cyndi Lauper to
Duran Duran.
A very short stint with Cameo.
Okay. I didn't know that part. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it lasted about 3 weeks, but I had a little stint with that, and then I decided I wanted to go to England. So
that worked out.
I literally got off the plane. I started working with this new band called So, and that lasted for about a year, and then my phone rang and it was Duran. So
then Soul Asylum.
Then
after
Soul
that.
Asylum.
Okay.
And then around '93, I started working with Nile Rodgers a lot, and I did a record for Chic, and then David Bowie and the B-52s.
Woo. And our guest is Sterling Campbell, by the way. Thank you so much for coming by and spending time. It's always so educational for kids to hear, you know, the experiences of drummers and how they got to where they're at. I think a lot of times these interviews are as educational as what you're going to show them behind the drum set also. But going back to that first gig, which was Cyndi, right? You were how old when that came up?
'86, I was 22.
Wow. So question always comes up, what's the best kids getting out of college, or even as they're in college? They're going to have to audition at some point. Had you gone through audition experiences to get into these bands, and what would you think would be the best way a student would prepare himself for that?
That's kind of a tough question because the time period was different. I'm in New York circa, early 80s. So the 70s were over and it was the 80s. And so you had all this new music coming about. You had the post-punk, you had new wave, you had MTV. So things were very thriving at that time, especially in New York. There was a lot of clubs to play.
Oh, yeah.
There's no clubs to play in Manhattan. There's nothing like that anymore. They couldn't afford.
Believe me, same thing in LA.
Yeah, they couldn't afford the lease now. So there was a lot. There was a lot to do, and I was very inquisitive, not just about all the new music that was coming about. And I probably would blame David Bowie, seeing David Bowie in '78. That made me understand there's so many different possibilities. So I think I grew a lot musically from that time I saw David Bowie in 1978.
How weird was that?
Because I was already listening to R&B, and
to play with him later must have been quite weird, huh?
Yeah. Well,
talk about dreams coming true.
The little legend is that Dennis Davis lived in my building on 101st Street in Broadway, and I saw him in the lobby, and I was 14 at the time, and I just asked him a question. I said, "Where you going?" He had a stick bag and a cymbal bag. He said, "I have a gig at Madison Square Garden."
That's not exactly a club down the street.
And then he pulls out a ticket, $19 to see David Bowie at Madison Square Garden. And I went, and that was it. I was like about 2 years in playing. And, that just set my whole goal. And my goal was to somehow get to David.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, was there, thinking back to the audition process with Cyndi or any of the other bands, were you auditioning with other drummers?
Okay, I'll bring it. So I got into the 80s, and I went to the High School of Music and Art, which the movie Fame was based on. So when I got there, they were like, okay, we're gonna go see this movie we just did about the school called Fame.
Oh, that had actually just been done at that point.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So when I got in, I was like, okay, this is cool.
My school.
Yeah. And there was a lot going on. There was a lot of people making music and a lot of new music, and I was very interested in playing like more of the new music. So there was a lot of gigs. So I was doing, playing with 4 or 5 different bands. And that really is how I learned. I'm just playing this, I'm playing the clubs, and just, I was very deeply, passionately into music. And did whatever it took. I always wanted to rehearse. I rehearsed every day. I was playing every other night. So by the time the Cyndi Lauper audition came, I felt, pretty confident and prepared.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Was it how did you hear about it in the first place? Because that question always comes up a lot.
So I had a gig one night, and the bass player just came up to me and said, "Hey, man, Cindy's looking for a drummer."
Another bass player story. We hear so many bass player stories. Remember, the bass player is going to be your best friend. Don't forget that, right?
Yeah, and he said, "Do you want to, you want to come down for the audition?" And the thing was, I was so into I want to play with David Bowie and Peter Gabriel.
Totally different vibe.
I wasn't even really interested. So I felt like, well, this is going to be easy, blah, blah, blah.
If I get it, fine, but I'll just do it for a while. Or interesting.
Well, I wasn't even thinking about taking the gigs because the manager came up to me and said, "Hey, you got the gig." And I was like, I don't know if I wanted to do it. And he just gave me the most important look.
Here's the lesson.
He just looked at me like this and said, let's go outside, man. And he said, "We're doing a world tour. This is Cyndi Lauper. This is going to be the biggest gig you ever did." And I was like, I guess you're right.
That's interesting. There's where attitude kind of trumps a little bit reality in a way where it's you were right with both trends of thought, I think, but made the right decision at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Backing up a little bit then, when did you first get interested in drums, and how did you learn the technical side of the instrument?
I played the records. I got into it. I know this is weird. Back in I grew up in New York City, man. Everything you did growing up was homemade. So when you see the old footage, you look at The Godfather. They're playing stickball. Or you finding some way to, if you didn't have a basketball court, you use the garbage can and stuff like that. So for some reason, I just started banging on cars.
On cars?
Yeah.
Okay.
We lived in the block. Everybody knew each other. And I would just start doing stuff like this. And then it's like, "Hey, Sterling, do that."
Not with bats or anything, with your hands, okay.
My left hand was the kick, and this was the snare.
Nice.
And then I think my mother picked up on it, and one Christmas, a drum kit showed up. So I was like, and of course that was Christmas Day, and then my mother's like, "There's no way he's gonna play drums right now." So my brother whisked me away for the whole day, and I was so like, "What are you doing?" Yeah, it's like.
And how old were you at that point?
That was around 76.
Okay.
So I was like 12 years old.
Okay. So you were ready at that point. You knew.
And I was already really into music.
You'd been playing drums whether you had a drum set or not before that time, probably.
Well, I come from a family of 5 brothers, and none of them became musicians, but they might as well have been. Because they knew things inside out. And my mother did too. My mother saw Billie Holiday and, went to the Savoy. My brothers saw all the Motown at the Apollo, James Brown. I actually got to see James Brown after school. I was in 3rd grade, and he had a matinee show at the Apollo for like $2. So I was very interested in music.
I bet you remember that like it was yesterday. There's those moments that you just don't forget.
I mean, come on, everything, living in New York, I mean, that was the Mecca. That was the place where everybody wanted to, that was the big gig. Even I remember watching the James Brown documentary, like he would tour the country, but the Apollo was the place to like set it off,
Yeah.
So I got to see a lot of great things. I saw Elton John in his prime and at Madison Square Garden. And, Isley Brothers. And,
Feel very lucky to have been through that.
Yeah, so that was huge. It was all raw and self-taught kind of thing. So I would set the drums up in the living room and play the records.
Which is today's experience with YouTube, the way a lot of kids will do it too.
Exactly. That was my YouTube, the mirror.
I've worn very, very many vinyls out myself, and needles too. Broadening your experience from drums is obviously your first instrument. Getting to where you could actually write. How did you branch out and learn a little bit of theory and harmony? And why did you find a necessity of that, or did it just come naturally?
I didn't find it. I just just tried my best to figure it out. It would just be really, I don't know, I'm kind of dyslexic when it comes to that, but I would.
Nothing wrong with that.
I would just figure it out, you know.
That's the diary of a drummer, I think.
Yeah.
We have to be a little dyslexic with some little ADD thrown in.
And enough where, like, I've listened to so much music, and I would literally learn, like, I know, like, I can sing it. I would Return to Forever, Romantic Warrior. I knew it like inside out. Like, I knew the guitar solos. I would just do fake guitar solos. But that was the way I learned music, just listening to records.
How important do you think that experience was for you, with all of these bands? I mean, the bands you played for, rhythm-oriented, but very much melody-oriented too, especially the more popular artists that you played with. Knowing song form, knowing how to play for them, as opposed to if you were in your own band, if you will.
I think music is, you know, I don't want to sound too like philosophical, but it's like this metaphysical thing. I remember. It was more like I remembered what the power of music was. Like, I had lost a cousin, and my aunt didn't really show any feelings about it. She didn't cry about it. But after the funeral, we were listening to, I think it was Interventions, and Golden Lady came on, and my aunt broke down. And from there on in, I saw the power, you know,
music.
Even to this day, my mother, every time my mother hears that record, anything from Stevie at that period, it transports us back to that whole, you know, she says, I always think of our cousin David. So at a very young age, that was like, I don't know, that was like 73 or something, and I never forgot that. And I never, you know, so that was very important to me, just the power of music. And the other thing, once again, it was just like memory, you know, let's be real, I mean, the music was unbelievable. Everybody was at the top of their game. You know, David Bowie's coming out in '72 with Ziggy Stardust, but then you got Joni Mitchell, and then you got Earth, Wind and Fire, you got James Brown, you got Aretha. Chicago, and we listened to all that. My brothers were very open-minded with music, so Al Green, you can go down the line, you know. So there was a lot to feed off of.
Which young kids should feed off of even today. You have to go back and hear where it all came from.
Well, it's got to hit you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it might not happen right away. You know, I mean, you know, you see there's this new band, Greta Van Fleet, and I don't want to say they sound like Zeppelin, but there's a strong, like, influence from them that they were obviously moved by it. And now they're selling out places, and so hopefully they can turn you know, people can get turned on to, like, the past. And I think that's happening anyway. All the big hits that you've heard in the last couple of years are based on, you know, Blurred Lines, Marvin Gaye.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a lot of stuff that Bruno Mars that, like, kind of pays homage to the past. So.
Well, it goes cyclical. And for the instrument, too, playing drums, obviously, that's always looking at what past. Every drummer I talked to was talking about how he took what he did from somebody else and used it and applied it. And we were recently talking about Zigaboo here a little earlier today. And though he is thought of as the originator on the DVD, that documentary I did of Zigaboo, he talks about where he got it from. And like, no, I just copied it kind of pretty much the way he did it, you know. And then when I got in the studio, I had to put my thing on it a little bit and change it a little bit. But with the artists you've played with, have they had a fairly open mind to, and I don't have to do it just like the record, to let you kind of find your own place?
Well, David is completely about that. You know,
I was going to ask you.
Pretty much, go ahead, you're on your own. I've never been given any direction by him.
And you were with him for quite a while, right? Right.
You know, off and on, like 93 to,
wow.
You know, the last record I did
Many
with him
years.
was The Next Day.
Sure.
Yeah.
And Grammy
like that
Award-winning
first-
record too with Soul Asylum, I think.
Yeah, that was interesting because the 80s were over and it was like rut-row. You know, a lot of, obviously, the carpet was pulled on a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, the whole thing just overnight.
It was
when
bizarre.
Nirvana came in, it just shifted. And I was, you know, I was 80s all the way. So the 90s came and yeah, I got a call from Soul Asylum one day and it was their first major label deal and you know, they asked me if I would come and play and
Was which of those?
I was like, what's alternative music?
That's
What's grunge? What is it?
That was my next question for you, actually. In those situations, I think you just named the situation. What were like some of the biggest challenges you had to?
They weren't challenges. I mean, I'm not saying it like, it's just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I just, like this, you know, I'll be honest with you, I have to say, if you ask me about my career, it's been that.
Nice.
Like this.
Right. This is what.
I feel like, I just feel like I faked it. I played in noise band, like in the 80s, I played in like complete noise rock bands and all these weird things, and I was trying to do it, but
I think a big key about what I'm hearing you say, which I think is a big lesson, is just you yourself. You weren't trying to do it like somebody else.
But I failed.
Yeah, well,
that's to me
but
is
it
the
turned out-
Beatles. That's the Beatles and the Stones. It's like if they would have had YouTube, I don't think it would have turned out the same. You know,
Would have
I
been
think they were
interesting.
trying to be this thing, but it came out completely different.
But it worked because that's who they were. I think that's.
I mean, you know, it's been amazing. But I'm still kind of scratching my head. I don't really have like an answer for you. I love music, and I was like, I would add other things from something else into it, just to sometimes almost like as a joke. That's why I always felt about. I saw it, an article with like Pete Townsend, and he just loved Keith Moon because it made him laugh. Like the fills were just so ridiculous, but at the same time it works.
Try it, and then I hear you saying a lot that you're playing for you keep using the word music, which is interesting, as opposed to drumnistic things where a lot of students out there who are practicing are thinking about how do I apply what I practiced to the drum set so I can show my chops or do what I'm doing. But everything I'm hearing you talk about, I think you're saying that's the foundation of your career, is just it's all about listening to and playing the music.
Well, there's so many, you know, there's so many styles, you know. Obviously, I was still too young to really like appreciate the time of like Hal Blaine, but I did I got the Ringo thing and you know, the Charlie Watts thing, but I was, you know, I love the whole Al Green sound.
Sure.
I love Earth, Wind and Fire, Fred White, who's so underlooked.
Yeah, I knew Freddie way back in the day. He was one of our.
He's amazing.
Yeah. First endorsees.
One of my first really where I was like, this is different, was Nigel Olsson with Elton John. You know, with the big fills. And, you know,
I was just going to say that, and he's still doing it.
Yeah.
Those stadium fills are like can't be.
Well, that was a different sound because I started noticing that too. There was this. You know, everything was like 70s, so things were a lot more drier and close sounding. And Elton's thing was like expansive.
Yeah.
So I started, I was really inspired by that. And then, you know, jazz fusion kind of really kicked in. You know, obviously Cobham and Lenny White. And I mean, I can go down the line.
So these are all, which was a question you're answering here, you know, some of your favorites that you looked up to.
There's so many. There's Ed Green, Earl Young, all the Philadelphia stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was a smorgasbord of stuff, you know. So there was a lot to take a little bit and pieces of.
Right, put it together.
And I think I brought that into the 80s and found tried to find little places. And then the 80s came, and then you got Stuart Copeland.
Yeah, there you go, right.
And you had all the stuff coming out of England, Japan. It was this drummer, Steve Jansen. It was amazing. Bill Bruford. There's all those Kate Bush and the musician, that whole English style of playing.
Sure.
And I was very inspired by that.
Question I often ask, at this point in your career, if you had to list a couple of people you would like to play with that you haven't yet, do you have any favorites that you think you would say, boy, if I get that call, definitely would be excited to take that one? Just because that'll lead to some of the other favorite artists that you would like people to listen to.
Another huge impact artist, I saw Peter Gabriel in 1982. And that was a whole nother, he was ushering in a whole nother ball game.
Sure.
Which I don't think gets recognized, because he was really into, like, sampling found sound, but he made it even, it wasn't just like for the sake of found sounds, he made it musical. And Jerry Marotta was the drummer on that. And, that's another huge influence in the stuff what he was doing with the toms that you hear in every that was, to me, that was Jerry Marotta.
Perfect.
Yeah, so Gabriel.
When you, be easier to answer this question when we have you behind a drum set, but thinking about how you think so melodically, when you're playing a solo, and are you thinking of a song form? I'm bringing this up because we're doing a series of lessons on here on basically the melodic side of a drummer's life, and it's come up quite recently. But I'd like to hear your answer to that.
I don't play solos.
So, that in none of these shows do they have a? You're not
only something that has something that
like a vamp going on under it, kind of a thing.
Yeah, but normally it's not only that I don't play solos, I don't like to play solos. I leave that to the great soloists, the guys that are really good at it. I don't consider that's something, I'll be honest, I'm just not confident about playing a drum solo. I'm very happy just playing the pocket and steering it and just keeping it.
That's Ringo Starr's answer too. Greg Bissonette said, Greg, of course, he was warming up backstage before they went on to play together, and Ringo happened to come by and said, what are you doing? He says, I'm just warming up. He says, well, why would you be doing that without a band? It's like, there's no reason to be playing without a band. That's the way you play drums, right? That's what it's for.
I love band drummers a lot. So Fred White, Earth, Wind & Fire, and Charlie Watts and Keith Moon, and it's a part of the overall thing. I mean, I yearn for that, to be in a band where, and you find your
bandmates
the bandmates and your sound within the band.
And it's a unit.
You see U2 out there, and Larry Mullen is just like, man, especially in the 80s, they were just like hooky drummers, all of these guys. You would go out and buy a splash cymbal because of him. Yeah. Because it was where he placed it, and the octobans. I just went in octobans, and watching Stuart Copeland play, and
Terry, the brief period.
I saw him with Missing Persons. Chad's amazing, man. Like that whole thing when he ushered in the '90s, man. They came out. It was like
it was different. It was a different world. Yeah.
And it could be that. Just everything was. The record companies, everything was in tune. People were there because they were professional, like A&R guys who knew how to hear a guitar, hear somebody play something on a cassette, just playing acoustic guitar, and could formulate and put something together, get the right people behind it. People knew how to market stuff because they had a sense of music. I'm just not sure if that's the case now.
Well, that's one of the trials, I think, side of YouTube, and where younger musicians today, they have to do exactly what you said. They almost have to have some of the talents of what would have been a record company's job. They know how to promote their stuff, how to record it, how to get it out there.
I got to work with some great people. I got to work with Nile. I got to work with, it was very briefly, but I had one meeting with the great Arif Mardin. I got to work with Eno. I got to work and just see if they didn't, you're going this way, and if they just did that, and all of a sudden, things flourish. Then they had that musical sense, like, do this, take that out, that's too much. You know, you had these incredible musical people that could, you know, help you. And sometimes it's not great if the artist is making the decisions.
Well, it's back to they become part of the band, they become part of the creativity of the project.
Yeah, you had incredible people, Richard Perry and all these, you know, some people, you know, Prince was amazing on his own, he can figure it out, but that's not the norm.
No, certainly not.
You had Trevor Horn and, you know, you had these amazing, huge parts of what made those songs, what made the album. There was a filter in Quincy Jones. So, it ain't getting out.
Yeah.
Until, like, you know, I need to hear a single.
Yeah.
I need to hear 4 singles. I need to hear 5 singles, you know? The standard was pretty high in terms of that.
When you're in the studio, as opposed to a live stadium type environment, the subject has often come up on the site too. Do you approach the way you're playing the song differently? Are you more cognizant in a recording environment of, sometimes I've heard drummers say they'll do less there when they're playing live, or they won't take, obviously.
It's a totally different thing with the headphones, man. I'll be honest with you, still haven't really figured it out. But there's like almost 2 different eras of it, because I remember, you know, working in the studio and you had to wait for the tape to roll back, and it's like it gave me time to, like, okay, what did I mess up in there? You know, you're going for whole takes.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
let's do it again from the top.
Yeah, there was, you know, you would punch once in a while, but you're really trying to go for a performance. I'd be honest with you, I'm not just like hoping it just works out.
Yeah.
And pretend like I know what I'm doing half the time. But you know, but I mean, I know what a song is. I know, you know, I listened to it like where, you know, like I said, there was great drummers like Stuart Copeland, you had Steve Gadd, you had Bernard Purdy. They would just do little things that would just set the song up into the verses, to the choruses, do a drop, you know. You know, Larry Mullen would come up with these phrases, you know, all that kind of stuff. And Mel Gaynor with Simple Minds, and like that big drum fill and Don't You Forget About Me. I mean, that was an amazing thing. And to think that was on the radio, to think that drummers were featured on the radio it's weird to say, like, wow, I can't believe that happened. Because now that's not the case, you know.
But as things go around, we're counting on that coming back here on Drum Channel.
Well, I mean, if you wanted, like, you want your moms, and you want the housewives, you want the normal people getting on a train with their earbuds, you know, singing the song. That's what they do. They listen to the songs, you know.
And then makes you want to dance.
If I can write a song and have my mother humming the melodies, and, you know, then you're on track, man. You know.
I'll say.
Because my mother and I, this is a really deep thing. We literally were going to the same concerts. By the 70s, things were so good that there wasn't that thing. We're going to see Stevie Wonder. We're going to see Elton John. Even my mother knew Elton John stuff,
Sure, of course.
Know? We'd go see the Isley Brothers and stuff, you know, and it was like, the music was so powerful. The melodies were so powerful, and obviously the craftsmanship. I mean, I'm not saying it's like even gone. I mean, I think sometimes, you know, things probably have to go through a process. You know, I'm starting to see there's really creative stuff happening. Even and I mean that even in the electronic thing. This guy Flume from Australia. He's just a DJ, but the way he programs, it's pretty amazing.
Wow.
And there was this guy Jay Dilla, who, if you ask Questlove, is probably one of his biggest influence, and he was programming on the MPC, but it was what he was doing on the MPC. You
become a musician on that instrument, just like anything else.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot out there.
A lot of the artists you played with when you're out there in touring, I assume, had backing tracks. So at one point, the click track had to enter your
I was
repertoire.
already into it because the 80s came around and that was a new thing. But, I saw Simple Minds in 1982. They're running, there's sequences going on and they're playing, and it's got the two things going at the same time. I mean, you can feel the energy of the band. The band was original. I was doing it in all the bands I was in, in a very crude way at the time, because we didn't have the money and you had to make the best of it, But I was very much into, all that stuff.
So early on, you were used to playing to a quick, yeah.
A lot of it was just I liked the way the blinking lights look. It just looked cool, It was like that was the first reason why I got into it. But Trevor Horn was making really cool records. Then Scritti Politti came out and took it to another level. And Ferrone's playing against electronic tracks.
Yeah.
It
made it feel natural. That's the trick.
Peter Gabriel. The album Security is a masterpiece. And there's a great thing online of him making that album Security. If you want to go and check out, his whole concept. And it seems now it's like so normal. You can just go on, you can download stuff so easily. But this was like unattainable information.
Back then,
you had to have a Fairlight,
well,
a couple $100,000 unit to sample.
One of our goals here in Missions on Drum Channel is just to bring those experiences to young drummers that you used to have to wait to catch the guy behind stage, or you didn't have the access. You waited till they came to town to hear their stories and maybe get to know them a little bit, or you read a magazine about it. But actually having you here and talking about it, and here's how you made it. And
with Duran, we used reel-to-reel.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had a speaker literally banging out the cowbell. I don't know how it didn't get picked up by the mics. I had this little speaker that with a cowbell in it.
Coming just to you, and that
just
was
coming to me.
That was it.
Yeah, it wasn't a headset. I didn't want to wear the headset. So.
Live, wow, that's fantastic. Well,
so yeah, we were running those tracks. Once again, that's another band, Duran. Just, MTV had just come out, and here's this new band that sounds got they sound a little bit like Chic.
Yeah, edgy.
But it's got these, these arpeggios going on and these synths, and they're in Sri Lanka, and I was like, yeah. It's like some James Bond.
So you're with them pretty much at the beginning then?
No, I came into Duran's world around 88.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Well, it's hard for younger people to see when MTV came and it became visual. I mean, that was like a game changer.
Sure.
It's now you're seeing these videos and they're in these exotic locations and whatever. It's in hindsight it seems naive, but it was really it was a new thing.
And coming up on your horizon, you're going to be going back to New York shortly.
Going out with the B-52s this summer. We're doing a double bill with Culture Club.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be good. I've taken on the music director chair there, so I've been creating tracks and stuff for trying to.
You're so soft-spoken about it. I mean, he's taken on the music director chair is, it's quite a chore.
Can I'll be honest with you, it came about really out of just I'll tell you the story, man. It really tripped me out. I was out with David, and we had just did a show in, I forgot where we were in Brussels. And Ricky Lawson was filling in, I guess, with Simon Phillips with Toto.
Mm-hmm.
So they came to the show. So, we're talking, and at the end of it, we give each other a hug. Ricky gives me a hug, and then he whispers in my ear, he's like, "Don't lose this gig." Meaning, and then he backed off of me, and the look on his face, meaning this has changed. Music has changed, and in terms of being, where it was going, there's gonna be scarcity involved. And I'll never forget that look. God, rest his soul. I mean,
sure.
It was a deep moment. I took that very seriously. So, I just so now my whole attitude is it's got to be right. I want to work.
Sure.
So that the way I even got to that music, I just cared too much. Like I just didn't want to be complacent anymore. Just like nothing is good enough. That was good and it worked for this year. What's next year? What's next couple of months? So I was always thinking ahead, and I got really versed with programming and arranging over the years. I mean, I worked with, I wrote songs with Duran. I watched them work. I've been around David for all those years and how he was doing things. I watched Nile do things. So yeah, I've learned a lot of things. I was around Tony Visconti, These are,
can't get
now they're like freaking, they're
on-the-job training couldn't get better with all that.
It was amazing. It was amazing. And I can't tell you how incredible they were. I mean, you listen to the music. These guys are living off their careers, man.
Sure.
They were that deep. They were coming up with they just had this incredible ability how to formulate something, that's could be technically out of the ether and just go.
Amazing.
Incredible, yeah.
You're extremely humble, and for all of
I try to be.
the huge successes that you've had through the years, and I think it's just very inspiring for the young students to not only hear about your career.
I love music. That's why. I think it's an incredible thing, and of course, at the timing of it, think of like all the greats, like these people that just never had. You could even have these opportunities that you have now. So.
Of artists and the drummers of those periods too. That there was so many great drummers. I go back a little bit more generationally than you to hearing Coltrane play and Elvin and Miles Davis, and that's seeing what happened in the late 50s, early 60s. That was another whole huge transition, not only of music but of the instrument itself.
Yeah.
I
went to school with the kids.
Who?
I went to school with Ron Carter's kids.
Oh, you're kidding.
I went to school with Gil Evans' kids.
Whoa, how fun is that?
Yeah, and I got...
Oh, because
that was another part of it.
Sometimes
it's not even like just meeting Gil Evans. And I didn't have to hear anything. It's just like to see him and like, wow, this dude exists, and he's like... But he's in his apartment, like, like who didn't throw the garbage out?
It's just a guy,
as crazy
right?
It sounds, Yeah, well, like I said, New York at that time, and if you're into music, it was an amazing time, because even I got to see the old, because there was, New York was, especially like towards the end of the 70s and the 80s. So I saw Dexter Gordon. I saw the Heath Brothers. I saw these things, because it wasn't as, I don't know, like now you got Ticketmaster and people lying around the corner, but it was almost like, oh, wow.
Down the street, who's playing there tonight? Yeah.
So the Brecker Brothers, oh yeah, they're playing,
hard to believe.
Stuff. Watch Richard T. And I couldn't even get into the club. There was this place called McKell's. And they had this long glass window, and you just look up, and you just, you have to stand on your feet, but there's Gad and Richard T.
Richard T. and Gad, those DVDs that,
Cornell
the
Dupree,
CDs, the CD that they have out is unbelievable. Some time ago.
It was an incredible time of music. Growing up, if you're gonna be a musician. So, now it's like, it's like YouTube. There's all that stuff there, and I guess you just have to find your...
Well, you have to find your way through it.
It seems like a lot of people are, though, man. There's people doing stuff like... I saw some little Japanese girl playing, like, Good Times and Bad Times by Led Zeppelin. She was, like, 8 years old and played it to the T. And I was like, what? It's crazy.
It is. Well, the ever-changing world that we see out there, it's great to have you being a part of it, because I think you're bringing a lot to the table yourself.
I'm trying.
No question about it. I can't thank you enough for joining us here. And as you're on tour, getting back here to LA, think of this as like your little home away from. We're in the big room here at Drum Channel today.
Well, I'm so happy to be here now.
It's our pleasure and a compliment too. And looking forward to doing more too.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. We'll see you real soon.
Yeah.
And thank you. We'll see you soon too.